Hello everyone and welcome to Tournament Tactician, the show where I make a lot of assumptions, such as you know who I am, what we're doing here, and this isn't the first video of mine that you've seen, but in case all of those things aren't true, my name is Boulevard, I'm a caster and analyst for Legends of Runeterra. This is my tournament tier list, and this is Tournament Tactician, the only weekly YouTube series where we go over said tournament tier list in a video format. Now, last week's episode kind of covered the basics of week one. Here's what we're looking at. Our top three was solidified. Didn't think that was going to shake up too much going into the seasonal, but there's always potential for it. And what I really wanted to do this week was just kind of clean up tier 2 and give you an idea of what we're heading into the weekend with. And then on Wednesday, I will have my longer, much more in-depth seasonal edition of Tournament Tactician. So not going to get crazy into the matchup charts here. Mostly just kind of talk about what new decks have popped up, a little bit about the Golden Aegis tournament, and talk about tier 2 specifically, as that's kind of where the most movement has happened. So we'll kick things off as we usually do in tier number 1. We're going to scratch the surface on everything a little bit. Winding Light PNZ, widely regarded as one of, if not the best deck in the game. Aphelios Zoe Vi is the standard. Some players are playing Victor instead of Zoe. That tends to perform better in the mirror, but that's really all of the differentiators between lists that we're getting. That's really the only customization that you're going to get out of something like that. Now, Bard, we've moved Bard, Poppy, Jarvan up to tier 1. I had it in tier 3 for the opening weekend. I thought the Demacia nerfs were going to hurt a little bit more than they did. And one thing that I've noticed is that right now Europe seems to be bigger on the Demacia version of Bard, whereas the Americas is still slightly bigger on Ionia. But it's possible that with the Golden Aegis Grand Finals being won by the Demacia version of Bard, that we'll start to see a little bit of flopping on that as we head into this final week of testing. Not super confident on that. I don't have a great read on which one is going to actually be more popular in the seasonal just yet, because we do have to see how long this wave of Demacia Bard lasts in the Americas. And there is like this Bard, or not Bard, but Poppy Taric deck that's running around. So we'll see if players decide to go for like that alongside Ari Bard, and then for like scouts or something to round out their lineup. That sounds more European, but we'll see where it ends up going. And then TF Nami, still doing TF Nami things. It's suffering on ladder, but that's expected, right? There's a reason that like Annie Twisted Fate is down in tier 3, where it's like one of the highest performing, or most played rather, ladder decks. But Nami Twisted Fate, sub 50% win rate on ladder, but we know how it really is. And then getting down into tier 2, Jaysheimer staying where it was. Fizz Riven I talked about last week. I said that this deck will have its day at the sun sometime this format. It looks like that might have been during the Golden Aegis finals, where I believe first and second place teams each had a lineup with Riven Fizz, which I have dubbed Alpha Papercraft, and then Akshan Nar, which is Beta Papercraft. And the reason for that is that, 1, Fizz Riven is better, in my opinion. 2 is that you are not really seeing Akshan Nar unless they are already running Riven Fizz. So you'll see Alpha Papercraft without Beta Papercraft, but Beta Papercraft is there as a secondary to Alpha Papercraft. So that's all well and good. Thrall's moved back up a little bit as players kind of figured out the builds here. Thrall's doing big things on ladder. Again, the trick seems to have been cutting Promising Future entirely. Now, there's still some variation within the lists of Thralls. Not an insane amount. Everybody's on Drac, Lord Inquisitor. Everybody's still on, like, Sands of Time as a 3 of. Like, there's some deviation on Avalanche and whether or not you want to keep that in there. For a tournament-specific lineup, it does kind of depend on which of the big 3 you plan on leaving open. You know, if you're playing against Winding Light PNZ, you probably want to put Avalanche in there, keeping that board clear is a good avenue to victory. But again, it's one of those things that you kind of have to tweak towards the matchups that you want to leave unbanned, how the rest of your lineup shakes out and everything. Scouts, again, thought Demacia was over-nerfed. Not really the case. Scouts gets to come back in. Azir Aurelia has been performing really well on ladder as of late. It's been very popular, at least in the Americas, where I've been playing, because I think I've put in like 60 games over the last couple of days to try and get a good read on the meta and how everything's shaking out. And Azir Aurelia seems to do pretty good into some of the tier 1 decks. You know, just every time I queue up Twisted Fate Nami and I run into Azir Aurelia, it feels really bad, and I think that is something that we're going to continue to see go into the seasonal. Now, Nami Twisted Fate is not a deck that I expect to be popular enough for you to want to run a counter lineup with Azir Aurelia in it, but again, it's a deck that has enough agency that I think you can confidently run in a lineup, especially because we have so many Azir Aurelia simps in the Americas shard. It'll probably have a decent presence at the seasonal. I'd say 3 to 5 in the top cut, but that's a prediction we'll get into next week. And then FTR had a really strong weekend on the online league series specifically. I think there were 3 of them in the top 8. And again, I think that is just avalanching, and players not really wanting to play Thralls and going to FTR for that sweeper deck instead. Now, it's possible that that playstyle was better on the opening weekend than it will be going into the seasonal, but I've played a little bit of FTR on ladder. It doesn't feel bad, really. If you are playing against it, you're probably going to be banning the Ari Bard if that is something that your opponent brought. Really just the Homecoming deck, the Deny deck. And there's really not a lot of Ionia outside of Ari Bard. There is the Alawi Ionia that won Golden Aegis in 2 of their 3 lineups, But Roji's been big on that deck for a while, and Roji's team did win, so it's unsurprising to me that he was able to bring this deck to his teammates and they refined it. I don't really expect Alawi Ionia to catch on en masse. I think some of the higher level players will give it a shot, but I think this could have just been a surprise factor thing. And maybe Roji and his teammates run it back for the seasonal and find success with it, but I don't think you're going to get a random huge spike in Ionia Alawi, like, oh, this is the thing that everybody slept on, and now that it's won the Golden Age tournament, we're all aware of it, and it's going to spike into playability. I don't even have it on the tier list just now. That might change for Wednesday. Might change for the seasonal edition, but for now, I did just kind of leave it off because it feels more like a Roji-specific thing. Like, I'm not going to put Talia Malphite on the tier list just because Roji wins a tournament with it. And then moving down into tier 3, got that cleaned up a little bit as well, moved a couple of decks down into the filler section, like Spiders and Pirates. They've been so quiet this season. Even when we see aggro, we're talking about like a Zero Aurelia, we're talking about Annie Jin, we're talking about the Katarina Ziggs, I think it's also Annie deck. So if you're planning on bringing triple aggro, I'd advise against it. You probably want to be, or at least not triple burn, right? You want to be a little bit different than that. You probably want to put in a Zero Aurelia or something in there, a more board-based aggro deck than a straight-up burn triple. Triple burns never really worked out for anyone. You know that. I know that. I'll keep saying it as long as I keep having to do these seasonal tournament tacticians. But again, more on that next week. But some of the other decks that I wanted to highlight as just still performing okay, probably fringe playable, not something you need to be super prepared for. We're talking like Sun Disc, we're talking Viego Shurima. The Noxus version of Viego has really fallen off a cliff, much more than I expected it to. And it is possible that that was just, yeah, the power level actually did go down that much. There's some room for Fearsome to put in work in the meta right now, but you would need multiple Fearsome units, and you would need them to be cheaper. You would need, like, Mist Rates level Fearsome, not like, here's my 5-mana Fearsome, followed by another 5-mana Fearsome, followed by a 7-mana Fearsome. It's just a little bit too late in the game at that point, so I think that is where the Elise Katarina Viego version is struggling. Probably take it off the tier list for next week. But we have seen some success out of the Ionia version, but that was Team NNT. Always have to take it with a grain of salt when Team NNT is the one coming out with the Viego Ionia, because they are just known for playing that deck, Elward, Hake, and Matri specifically. But Viego Shurima should still be okay. But what that seems to be getting sidelined for right now is actually Nasus decks. Now, I've seen Thresh Nasus. I think Shadox played it to 3rd, 4th place finish in the Golden Aegis tournament. But again, Golden Aegis, I think his other two teammates were like on the big 3 for the lineup, and then Shadox just kind of like got to play whatever. Ended up on Thresh Nasus. I've seen Thresh Nasus starting to pop up a little bit on ladder. I have some theories about that I'll get into next week. I don't want to like talk, I might not even get into it next week. I don't want to talk about it too much because I feel like my role as a caster is, and where I just kind of exist in the space, is to give you an overall picture, not really interject like my own personal bias or idea, or, well, my personal bias, yeah, I'll throw that in there. But my own like pet projects or deck list ideas, those I tend to downplay and not bring up as often because I just feel like that's not really my lane. But I will say that I think Thresh Nasus might be something, but I think it's actually Zillion Nasus, which is a big flop from when the deck initially came out, and I thought Zillion Nasus was like garbage. You had to be Thresh Nasus. And there were a couple of like Zillion Nasus diehards, like What Am I always played Zillion Nasus because he had Thresh Aesol elsewhere in the lineup. But I think there might actually be something in Zillion Nasus right now. So that's something I'm looking at, but I'm probably not going to look too hard at it. But if you needed an idea, a baseline to like, oh, I'll try anything at this point, Zillion Nasus. And that's about it. Frostbite midrange had a strong performance on the opening days, didn't even really persist into the opening weekend. More like the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday tournaments, and hasn't really been seen since then. Reckoning is a huge swing against all of the top decks. The problem, as always, is sort of getting to the Reckoning safely and making sure that A, 1 Reckoning was enough, and B, keeping your 5 attack units around. You know, it can be very tough. It's a little bit slow, but that's sort of what Frostbite Midrange has going for it, on top of the LeBlanc Incisive Tactician loop. It's really just like, can you get a blowout Reckoning? If yes, you win the game. If not, you probably don't win the game. And it's just not happening that often. But anyway, that is going to do it for me for this week. Again, just wanted to give you, we seem to have like a very clear picture of what the meta actually looks like. I don't expect too much movement in this tier list going into Wednesday. Maybe Thralls shoots up into tier 1. Maybe Alpha Papercraft, but probably not. But that is something that I will deal with you on Wednesday. Again, I will, like last time that I did a seasonal tournament tactician, I will have the matchup charts of each deck into the top 3. Try to give you an idea of how to build out a lineup. But I do want to point out that last time I did that, and I adjusted things based on the matchup charts, that did actually put Sundisk in tier 3, because it was very bad against, what was our top 3? It was Pantheon, Aphelios, and I don't even remember what our third good deck from last season was. Like Ziggs Talia, maybe? Yeah, I think it was Ziggs Talia, Pantheon, and Aphelios. And like Sundisk was losing to all of them on the stats, and then we had a Sundisk mirror in the finals. So take it all with a grain of salt. Test. Know your personal matchup charts. Know when that is because you are better at the matchup than everybody else. Know when it is not. Know when it is because your testing partner sucks with the deck. All that kind of stuff. But that is, again, something we will dig into a little bit more next week. Again, I have been Boulevard. This has been Tournament Tactician. You have been great. And as always, good luck in your tournaments.